Welcome to I'm Spiritual But, a one-of-a-kind talk show creating a new global conversation about inclusive spirituality. Whether you're religious or not religious, this show seeks to inspire you to discover your own unique spiritual experience. And now, here is your host, award-winning author and actress, Anne Scottlin.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us again here today on I'm Spiritual But. So happy to have you. And yes, please like and subscribe here on USA Global or whatever platform you're watching on today. And just to remind you, this is a live show, so you can call in, write in with your messages, questions for myself or my guest at any time. Just jot those in the comments and we'll respond to as many as we can today on the show. So I'm Spiritual But is a show about a global conversation of inclusive spirituality, meaning how can we talk about spirituality, whether it's religious or not religious, in a way that helps everyone learn and understand. So we're not teaching any one thing. We're looking to hear different voices in different places. And today we have a really unique episode and a wonderful guest. Our episode today is called I'm Spiritual, But It's Not Okay. And today's episode is about violence in spiritual guise. I think this is a very relevant topic and something that we should all be aware of and talk about. And I'll also include people in the conversation who've been in that experience, especially when it happens in a spiritual or religious environment, which is even more challenging. So my guest today is going to be Jamie Wright. I absolutely adore her. We met at a conference where we were both speakers recently in Washington, D.C., and just really hit it off. And her message is so powerful. And I'm just so delighted to have her as a friend and to have her on the show. So I'll tell you just a little bit more about Jamie. She's an award-winning resilience and encouragement coach. She's an advocate, an activist, and a domestic violence survivor. And she has a passion to provide survivor-led awareness, to provide empowerment, to provide advocacy for especially communities of color affected by domestic violence. She's a passionate woman of faith. She has appeared on 60 Minutes, BBC News, Fox 26, The Doctor's TV show, and tonight she's going to appear on HGTV. So we're going to hear more about that at the end. You'll definitely want to tune in and see her there as well. So please help me welcome Jamie Wright. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Anne. Happy Wednesday.
Same to you. So excited to see you here and have you here. Just your beautiful smile, your beautiful energy. So this is an interesting conversation we get to have today. First of all, about spirituality, what that means, whether people are religious or not religious, and what happens when bad things happen in a spiritual guise or in a religious cloak, and how do we cope and work with that? So tell me first just a little bit about your spiritual journey in a nutshell over the years as a woman of faith and what has brought you to where you are today.
Absolutely. Listen, Anne, I am grateful to have the opportunity to be on your show. Thank you for having me. Thank you for, being willing to lean into these hard but necessary conversations. So a little bit about my background, my faith journey, everything spiritual led, everything about my religion and my belief system goes back to my grandmother. From the beginning of my memory as a little girl, I've always been in spiritual environments. And now, I'm a Christian, but I respect and honor and pay absolute respect to all religions. But I never remember not being in church growing up with my grandmother. And as an adult woman, I still very much lean on my faith in my spiritual community.
which is amazing. I mean, and that's a big part about it. Community is a big part of spiritual experience. I think it's an interesting question we have here, and more for another day, which is sometimes people find themselves in an isolated spiritual experience, which is great as long as they're having that vertical, internal, whatever you want to call it, connection. And then sometimes we really need the community for support. And I know for myself, when I've been in a spiritual community, it's usually one of those more powerful moments where you feel more deeply connected to the greater world, to other souls who have a like similar passion. At the same time, for other people who maybe aren't in a religious environment right now, we have events like this where we can have an open and inclusive conversation. So I love that. I love that your grandmother influenced you. I'm always saying we all have an impact. It just is a matter of what impact we're making. And so clearly your grandmother really had an impact on you, which is really beautiful. So let's see, we're going to pop up your quote here. And this is a quote from Jamie herself, but it's so meaningful and personal, and says, "I was victimized, but I'm absolutely not a victim. I was victimized, but I was absolutely not a victim." So Jamie, tell me why this conversation is coming into a greater spiritual conversation. What is violence and spiritual guise, and how has that shaped your life?
Beautiful question. And so it definitely has become very clear to me that my story of overcoming homelessness as a result of domestic violence during the pandemic, and just overcoming, how life's right, coming home pregnant at 14, and being, a survivor of molestation and being sexually mishandled pretty much all of my young adult years. I know that it's my call and my purpose that the Creator put me on the earth as for such a time as this, to have the hard conversations in the spiritual and non-spiritual communities. Is what I know for certain, and is that based on my own personal experience, is that ugly but beautiful duality. The beautiful, grandmother I had, that steadfast, definitely one of the most spiritually led and amazing women I have the honor of coming from and knowing. The ugly duality is, as she was rearing myself and my cousins and my sister up in the church, some of us, my sister and I specifically, was being emotionally neglected, sexually mishandled, and just had a really tough childhood. And some of it we'll touch on tonight in the HGTV show House Hunters that I'll be on. I'll be watching it the first time with everybody else, but I know that we'll touch on that. So going back to why it's important for me to have a conversation and why I'm honored to be on your platform is because it's not until we have the hard conversations, right, to we acknowledge that these ugly things are happening in environments that are supposed to be conducive to making us beautiful people and adults, will it be eradicated if we continue, and I say we in the spiritual community specifically, to act like it's not existing, or to act like when it does exist and is brought to the forefront, that praying alone is going to somehow eradicate it. So it's definitely my purpose, it's definitely my call to have the hard conversations, and not from a condemning standpoint, right? The faith that I lean into, my Creator commands me to love. Case in point, my ex that I allowed to put me in a situation that led me into homelessness, I wish him the best, right? Because I see his humanity. My stepfather that made my sister and I's childhood just trauma. And I also had these conversations. I was a little girl. Maybe, just maybe, my stepfather would have gotten the help that he deserved. He was battling his own childhood trauma and his own adult.
So I'm going to jump in here for a minute because Jamie's internet looks like it may have gone a little chunky on us. So, but this is such an interesting topic, and we'll have her back here in a moment. But what do you do when in your religious environment there is abuse, whether that's psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse? What do you do and how do you relate to that? And if any of you have comments, I would love you to write in on the platform you're on, comments or questions for myself or Jamie to talk about this. Because from my own background, I can only say that I know that sometimes in the most conservative and closed communities, statistics are actually higher for sexual violence and physical violence that goes unreported. Now, that's not necessarily Jamie's story, but part of it. So we're going to have her jump back in here and continue on around this conversation. There she is, which is wonderful. And so totally listening to what you said and taking it a step further, my question would be, so when you experienced violence, sexual or physical violence, in a community where of religious people who you trusted and who were supposed to be there for your ultimate best and highest good, how did that interact with your faith? How did you sort that out, especially as a child or a young person? Did that create some real challenges for you, or tell us more about that?
It definitely did. And for a very, very long time, I believed that my creator didn't love me or that I didn't matter, because in my mind, I'm like, well, if I mattered or if he loved me, then these, ugly things wouldn't be going on. Someone would come and save me. So for a very long time, and I just did not see myself through my creator's eyes. Hence, coming home pregnant at 13 years old, looking for attention and love from a man. Hence, being pregnant 5 times by the time I was 19 years old. Hence, looking for a man, right? But it wasn't until I started to lean into, I'm just tired of being tired.
Mm,
And I specifically remember Anne asking God to help my unbelief.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And he began and continues to show up in my life in mind-boggling ways. And my ex is an ordained minister. So when the physical abuse started, I thought it was normal. I thought that's what love looked like because I seen it demonstrated as a little girl. So that was a part of what love looked like. And B, he was a man of the cloth, right?
mm-hmm,
So somehow I convinced myself that it was okay. And it wasn't on this side of the journey until I was at the homeless shelter at the Houston Area Women's Center did I question, like, God, like I've done this and I've done that and I've tried so much to do this and do that. I'm not so sure about you. I'm not so sure about this thing.
mm-hmm.
You got to help me because I'm not sure. You got to help my unbelief. And I'm telling you, Anne, I remember in the shelter saying, praying to him, because I talked to him like I talked to you, like everybody else, because he knows, I'm like, listen, I know you give your strongest, the biggest battles to your strongest soldiers, but a sister is about tired. You have to help me through this. And so I was reminded to say a prayer to start to ask God, my creator, to allow me to start seeing me through his eyes. And that's where the 60-minute interviews came in, and all of these beautiful, amazing platforms that I now get the honor of sharing my story, not from a, oh, woe is me victim mentality, and definitely not from condemning anyone that causes harm. It's just to raise the conversations,
Mm-hmm.
to create
Absolutely.
solutions. That's it.
And it's such a gift to the world that you're able to share that conversation. Let's talk a little bit about the secrecy of violence in religious communities. I know from my own experience with friends, college roommates, and other people within my faith group as a young person, I knew of things that were going on, and yet going unreported. And maybe in that moment, I was too scared to report it as well. Although usually things had progressed to a point where there was some awareness by the time I found out. I was never that super nosy person. But living with someone, sharing a dorm room with someone who had been through so many of these things, fathers, grandfathers who were church elders, church deacons, leaders, and the secrecy where sometimes even mothers won't report their own husbands is bad enough in mainstream society. But it seems to me when people come together and put on that we are all in the faith and we're all doing the right thing and we're all seeking to be perfect, somehow so much gets swept under the rug. And do you see that as a real danger?
Oh, it absolutely is. And in my personal experience, when I knew that my life was in danger on April the 23rd, 2020, right after the pandemic, and we were locked down, and my ex, which was my partner at the time, told me that he wanted to kill me and later on hit me in the face with a laptop. After calling 911 and the police coming, I asked the police officers to not take my husband, my partner, to jail, but we needed to speak to our pastor. And when we got on Zoom with our pastor, our not just mine, our pastor told me that I wasn't safe and I needed to leave. And had he told me to stay, because I have so much belief and faith and trust in my spiritual community, I would have stayed. So that my personal story is a very good example of how important it is for spiritual leaders to um, be the bad guy if they need to, or the bad woman if they need to in order to protect the lives of the people in their congregation, mosque, and the children.
And how do you see, I know you've talked in the past about how we educate spiritual leaders, how we give them the tools they need so they feel confident to handle these situations and to make non-ego based choices. How have you been involved in that and encouraging that conversation?
Beautiful question. So everyone that comes in contact with me and they know I'm going to say something about resilience, I'm going to lean into the conversation of violence, and I'm always carrying my faith and my spirituality at the forefront of who I am. So with that, I volunteer with a couple of beautiful organizations here in the Houston area, the Harris County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. I'm an ambassador for them, meaning that I, share my story to law enforcement personnel, to faith-based organizations, of how important it is for everybody to have awareness and to have the tools, right? How to recognize, refer, and respond to a violent situation. I also have the honor of sharing the movement with an organization called DIA, which they provide specific domestic violence services to women and men of Asian descent. And oftentimes, what little bit I know about the organization, oftentimes they're leaning into the spiritual and faith community. So every chance I get in, I'm in training with them. I'm speaking alongside them so I can grab the nuggets and take it back to my faith-based organizations, take it back to my ecosystem. So yeah, and I honestly believe, and I think we talked about this, I honestly believe that historically our faith-based institutions just didn't know how to handle the situation. And so it's our responsibility, I feel like, to equip them with the tools. And then if they don't choose to use the tools that they've been equipped with, let's spank them on the hand, right? Let's hold them accountable. But it's hard for me to lean into a conversation of holding anyone, faith leader, a person that caused harm, accountable if they just didn't know.
Yes. No, fair enough. And then there's also a greater conversation that goes into the community around a faith-based or spiritual. And when we say religious or spiritual community, this can be a traditional church, traditional, synagogue, traditional anything, right? Including non-traditional religious or spiritual organizations. I've been involved, at least on the fringes, to several cult-like environments, which are infamous for keeping secrets and for even making abuse part of their ritual. Fortunately, I wasn't a victim of that, but I was aware enough to know that these things were happening. So how do you tell a mother, a sister, a friend, and, brothers and fathers too, when they know something is going on? From my limited experience, there's usually two reasons for them not reporting it. One is either they don't think they'll be believed, or two is they feel that there'll be repercussions from the community. Sometimes they're afraid they'll be embarrassed and that will embarrass the community. I know there's a lot of ego involved sometimes in these environments. So how do we teach people to come forward when they're afraid of their own spiritual leaders and their opinions?
Beautiful question, Ann. So the first thing I would say is reach out to advocates, right? The National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is streaming on your show, is a really good resource to reach out to, because the people that are attached to like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, the National Network to End Domestic Violence, these are trained individuals and that know the latest tools, that know, how to access safety plans that are readily available. So I would definitely encourage them to reach out to trained advocates. A lot of the times these advocates are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. A lot of times it's totally free, and absolutely every time is totally confidential. So what I would encourage them to do, because I'm no expert, right? I'm just a survivor that refuses to sit down, shut up, and color. But I do know experts that are in the field that I keep a resource tab right over here that I'm absolutely like, hey, I can't help you. I know that somebody that can. So I would definitely recommend them lean into advocates and people that are trained.
Amazing.
Every survivor is the expert of their own life, right? I was in a training not too long ago, and what I mean by that, Ann, is one survivor's like, listen, I can't file a protective order. Because if I file a protective order, you all take his gun away, he will kill me. Right? So those are some of the things that, and without the proper training and the proper knowing, someone might encourage that survivor to file the protective order in the moment, and she does that, and so that's why it's very crucial for anytime we have the honor of holding space for a survivor is asking them what they want and empowering them with like tools like the safety plan that I mentioned, empowering them to walk through what they want. And some of the times the statistics show, at least in the communities of color, that oftentimes we don't want our spouses to go to jail, or not just say people of color, because that's my bailiwick, and I try to stay I try to stay in line with what I know and never speak out about what I don't know. So a survivor might say, hey, I don't want this my partner to go to jail or prison or whatever. And if you're trained and you have the knowing, then you can empower them to make the best decision, which could be go get help for both parties.
It's so true. And one more comment on that before we go to a question. But yes, because, I had a tragedy literally next door to me in the last 8 weeks, where a survivor had not reported or not followed through with the reporting, and she lost her life. And it was very traumatic for our neighborhood, and being a next door neighbor and trying to support, older children and family members through this. It's when it's that close, even if it's not you, you really feel the impact, and you're like, well, why didn't why didn't she reach out, or he, right? Whenever the case, why didn't he or she reach out? Why didn't they? And, but it's challenging, and you're in a, you can professionally speak about this and the challenges that you face and the concerns about what happens to your family member and codependency. There's so many more aspects of this that we could talk, but to pull myself here back to sort of the spiritual question around violence and spiritual community. So Heather has a question. Thank you so much, Heather. Heather says, with your abuser being an authority in the church, how did you hold on to your faith so tightly and not let that situation in the past put a bad taste in your mouth about religion and spirituality? So thank you, Heather. Excellent, excellent question.
Yeah, thank you, Heather, for the question. And I'm always authentic and transparent. It did impact my relationship with my faith. I was a part of a beautiful women's ministry. I fell back from it. I found myself feeling very bitter. I'm like, how does a man call themselves, a man of God, and quick to be a verbally, mentally, financially, and emotionally abusive? However, Heather, what the aha moment that I had that made me really feel bad that I walked away from my creator was when I was at the homeless shelter, and I was contemplating suicide, you all. I was so shamed. I could not tell my family and my friends. And when I asked God, like, you got to help me through this, how he manifested for me in that moment was putting a beautiful psychotherapist in my life. And I went to therapy once, sometimes twice a week for about 9 months. And so through the therapy and working on myself, just organically, the relationship with my creator came back in where it's supposed to, or not supposed to, where I wanted it and needed it to be. I hope that answered your question, Heather. So long story short, I did back up, but through the therapist and working on myself, I have a relationship with him again, and I just love him. I love him to death.
That's amazing. Well, this is a really interesting concept, actually, that taking care of ourself can also be taking care of our spiritual wellness. As I've talked about emotional wellness for a long time. So then, and in talking more about spiritual wellness, what you said earlier in this program, which was about realizing that sometimes it's not just prayer that cures the problem, or that sometimes we have to take some action, some personal responsibility to call sin for what it is, to call evil for what it is, to move forward, to step out. And part of that is taking care of yourself. So, on a much different note, but when I went through a divorce within the church and how that was not supported and handled very badly at the time, which really crushed my heart and my faith in so many ways, because I had been so fully involved. Again, myself, I went to therapy as well. So getting yourself back into wellness, mental, physical, emotional wellness will support you in reaching out for that spiritual wellness, and maybe finding new connections in the spiritual world. I know one of the stories I tell was after, I was too ashamed to go to my own place of worship. And I don't know if you can relate to that or not, someone invited me to a different place where I didn't know anyone, a much more progressive environment also so happened to be, where divorce was understood more as a really sad thing that happens in the world and not something that polluted you or ruined your future with God. And when girlfriend of mine took me there, I just remember how emotional I was, because I was like, oh my goodness, there are people in my faith or in my spiritual experience, maybe not so much the community organization where I was, who care and who love me and who are connected to the divine and who are going to support me. And I feel, it was almost like a feeling of redemption, like feeling that love, feeling that people were really there for you and that wasn't criticizing, was really tremendous. So reaching out, taking care of ourselves first, which I love that too, calling the hotline, doing what you need to do, getting the therapy, and then giving yourself a breather Don't panic when your faith is shaken. You can still communicate in your spiritual way to the divine or whatever that is for you. Don't panic, and know that as you get well, things will heal. When you're in a car accident, not everything heals at the same speed. You have to kind of be patient and wait for those things to come back. So Jamie, what is there another part of your story that you would love to share that we haven't covered? I just want to make sure we don't leave anything out. Is there something that you usually like to share when you have these opportunities? Or if not, I can move on to other questions.
Yeah, no, just really quick. So oftentimes they hear my story, but I always want to leave anybody that I have the honor of touching with my story and my voice, how I did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think I shared this with your staff last night. I'm very spiritual and I'm very led by my faith. And I'm also very pragmatic and very practical, right? So
Yeah.
I want to leave your audience with what I call the art of becoming resilient. And it's 5 things.
Mm-hmm.
It's awareness, acceptance, accountability, refusing to give up, and taking action. Those 5 things, and is what I applied, what I continue to apply to just get me through this thing called life. Those 5 areas is what I know to be certain is how my creator downloads and pushes me through to like you said, to be the highest version and the highest person of myself. So
that's amazing. And can you repeat those again in case anyone was trying to jot them down?
Absolutely. And they are downloadable for free on my website, which
Perfect.
is jamierwright.com. But absolutely, it's the art of becoming resilient, and it's awareness. And what I mean by that is, for me, and we can apply this in any area of our life. I just apply it and unpack it with my story of overcoming homelessness as a result of domestic violence. Awareness. I wasn't even aware that I was in a domestic violence situation, right? But when I went to the shelter and started therapy, I became aware that I was in a textbook domestic violence situation. And then I was also aware that, like, whoa, okay, there is other ways of doing this. So the awareness, the acceptance, I had to accept an audience that no one was coming to save me and no one was coming to love me. I was the person that I was waiting on. So I better had got to work, right? The accountability part, this was definitely one of the toughest when I'm unpacking my domestic violence and homelessness. One of the toughest obstacles that I had to overcome, accountability through very close guided work with my therapist. I accepted and was accountable to the fact that I gave my partner my power. He didn't take it away, not in my He didn't have me hogtied or, like some survivors and some victims encounter. That wasn't my story. So if I was accountable for giving him my power, guess what? I was going to be accountable for taking my power back.
Amazing. Oh, I love that so much. So tell us a little bit more then about what homelessness was like, since we've talked quite a bit about the spirituality, and we'll come back to that in a minute at the end. But what was it? What was your journey like? You've shared some of it, and how were you able to come back from that? And how has that led you to national television several times, and including tonight?
So yeah, I get emotional. Definitely humbling. I never in a million years thought that I would be homeless. I worked my butt off, and after dropping out of school when I became pregnant at 13, worked my butt off to get, a master's degree and just to persevere, right? And have that tenacity. And to find myself at a homeless shelter when I was in my 40s was very humbling. I get very emotional because I'm grateful. When I look back at when I was in the homeless shelter, it was in the middle, like at the height of the pandemic. Everything was closed. I had one bag of clothes that I packed in my computer for work. So the donations that the shelter normally got, they wasn't receiving. Everything was shut down. I had to climb on a top bunk. The young man, when I reached out to the shelter the night that everything happened, the young man said, "We have a bed. but it's on the top bunk. Can you climb on the top bunk?
Mm.
So I remember talking to my knees, like, Lord, knees, y'all can't give up. Don't give out on me because I'm going to hit this floor, you know. So my walk of overcoming homelessness was definitely humbling. I definitely didn't recognize that I do have the strength I have and the resilience I have until I had no other choice but to lean into
Mhm.
it. Yeah, it's very humbling. And to think that I walked away from my creator,
Mhm.
he reminded me when I was in the shelter that he made me in his image, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
To know that, to think that I was willing to walk away from him because of the actions that I allowed some of another person to take, just is like
Mhm.
seeing his glory reign on my life now. It's just like, I'm sorry. I didn't, I was kidding.
So how did you come back from that? And tell us about you're going to be on HGTV tonight. So tell us a little bit about the story, about the event tonight, how people can find out more. What happened?
How I overcame it. I mean, not to get into too much of the details, but when I was at the shelter, and I walked to the places that I had a car, but I walked to the places like the post office box and the grocery store that I could walk to save my money for gas. I had a consistent income, but it didn't matter that I was making six figures a year because I was spending 99.9 of it, right? So the food that they provided, I ate
Mhm.
all in saving my money because I knew that I was going to have to transition out of the shelter. So by the time I transitioned out of the shelter in July, I had a little bit of a stash to bounce
Mhm.
back from.
Mhm.
Now, mind you, when I met my ex, my credit score was 850. And when I chose to walk away and stay away, it dwindled down to about 300, like to a credit score I didn't
Oh,
even exist it.
oh, wow.
Some of the practical steps that I took was there's at the apartment complex that I lived at, there was this app that I could pay $6 a month that report my rental history to my credit. So
Mhm.
I just
Mhm.
started rebuilding my credit. I went into a debt consolidation program.
Mhm.
I took out this ridiculous credit card with a high interest rate on purpose with my in-state goal in mind, knowing that I
Mm.
needed this credit card to rebuild my credit.
Mm.
So just
Mhm.
taking those practical, consistent steps of rebuilding my financial life and my credit back is how I was able to transition out of the shelter, buy a house, and then I'm telling you, living in my purpose and at the forefront of everything I do, giving my creator honor, spreading awareness and love and light. I submitted my story to HGTV, and
Amazing.
I know that they picked it up for several reasons, but I think one of the reasons was the Houston Area Women's Center, which is the shelter that I was at.
Mm.
I now have the honor of serving on the board of directors
Mm.
as one of the first known clients. There's survivors that serve on the
Mhm.
board, right? But I'm one of the first known clients. I think another one of the specific things that they picked up on, it was like, dang, who is this bionic woman? I'm like, all glory and honor to my creator. Was just the work that I do in the community,
Mhm.
spreading awareness, and then the resilience, just refusing to just be a victim.
Mhm.
And they picked my story up, and yeah, and I share with them what I'm sharing with your audience and you. Like, I went from a credit store, and I had to provide them evidence, y'all, because this is
Wow.
a syndicated TV.
Yeah.
So I had to provide them evidence of everything that I was
Wow.
saying. So I showed them where my credit score was 300 and went up to
Mhm.
a score that I was able to buy a house. So yeah, that just a little old girl from Northeast Oklahoma and refusing to just take a
I
licking
love it.
and lay down. I'm gonna take a licking and keep on ticking.
I love this so much. And that your spirituality really carried you. Your personal relationship with God, your higher self, your internal wisdom, whatever that voice is, that was what really carried you through the tough time. And it would have probably been a very different experience without it. So tell us where we can watch, see, participate in your program tonight on HGTV.
Absolutely. And thank you so much again, Ann. And thank you,
Yeah.
Ann fans. I love you already. It was an instant connection. I adore you. And I definitely am honored to be on your show. And I'm amazed at the things that you're doing to have the hard conversation. So you can follow me. I'm on all social media platforms at Jamie R. Wright, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. The show airs tonight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time on House Hunters .com or hgtv.com. But if you look at my social media, you all, I'm gonna post the link, but it airs at 9 o'clock Central Standard Time tonight. And in about 2 weeks, the producer said they'll give me a link that I can post on my social media. So just in case you don't see it tonight, just follow me on my social media platforms, and I definitely will post it because listen, you all, I'm just the vessel. And I count it all joy and I count it an honor to any time that I can provide inspiration, hope, and light, especially in the dark places in this world.
Thank you so much, Jamie. So all of you, if you can, flip over to House Hunters tonight, 9 p.m. Central Time. So you can do the math. Check out Jamie's amazing story. And you can see the link in the notes as well, or you can just tune into HGTV. Or if you miss it, you can follow her social media and check out and watch for the post there. If you have any questions for Jamie after the show, you can reach out on her website or on any of her other social media. Ask her questions, whether it's about spirituality, whether it's about living with violence in a spiritual setting. If you're in a relationship with a religious person or leader or an environment that's religious that is abusive, then you also have the hotline you can reach out to. It's right here in the notes. That can be physical, sexual, even psychological. They'll help you get to the place that you need to find your wellness again. And remember, even if you've feel like you've lost your spiritual connection a bit, where you don't feel the presence of the divine like you used to in some ways when you're going through a really hard time, just remember that we're still a whole person, that we're multifaceted. And as you get well psychologically, as you get support, as you get help, you're also going to be able to recover and find your way in your own spiritual journey. So Jamie, thank you again. I just want to tell you, I just adore you. I love you. I know we're going to be working together again. I don't even know what yet, but you're just like such a part of my heart. And thank you so much for sharing your story and being on the show today. And for all of you, please turn in again next week for a new guest on a new global spiritual conversation, addressing the tough topics. Making a safe place for us to discuss these things, even around spirituality, that sometimes get left out. So you can join us again next week. The show is always live at noon Eastern Time. That's 9 a.m. Pacific. And please shoot us a message. You can shoot it to my email, to our website, imspiritualbut.com, or my email, contact@annscottlin.com. I'd love to hear from you. Or if you have any other suggested guests, please reach out. And thank you so much. Have a joyful day, and may your heart be whole. See you next week.